On January 6, 2025, a massive protest erupted in the small city of Pucheng, Shanxi Province, China. What started as a mourning family's call for justice escalated into one of the largest uprisings seen in China in years. Thousands of ordinary citizens took to the streets, clashing with police, breaking through barricades, and demanding answers. But what exactly triggered the anger that set Pucheng ablaze? Was it a tragic accident, or was there something far darker behind the scenes? It all began with the death of Dong Changxing, a 19-year-old student at the Pucheng Education Center. On January 2nd, Dong fell to his death from a building. At first glance, authorities called it a suicide. But the situation surrounding his death quickly spiraled out of control, raising suspicions and fueling a nationwide debate. Was it really suicide, or had something more sinister occurred? Dong's mother, who had dropped him off at school just days before the incident, was shocked by the news. Her son had seemed fine, eager to start the new year, but just days later, her world turned upside down. At 3 a.m. on January 2nd, she received a call from Dong's teacher urging her to come to the school. But when she arrived, she found that something was wrong. She was kept waiting for hours and was not allowed to see her son. The teachers were unusually evasive, and when she pressed them for answers, she was met with silence. At 7 a.m., the police arrived to inform her that Dong had jumped. The family was shocked and devastated, but something about this story didn't sit right. Why were the teachers so secretive? Why were they controlling every move she made? When she was finally allowed to see her son's body later that day, she noticed that his face was untouched, but his neck and chest were bruised. The police insisted there was nothing suspicious, but the family was not convinced. How could someone fall from such a height without any visible injury to their face? And why was Dong's phone, his watch, and other personal belongings confiscated without explanation? The official response from local authorities came on January 5th. According to the police report, Dong's death was ruled as a suicide. They claimed that Dong had been involved in a dispute with 2 other students the night before, which led to a fight. Later, Dong reported the incident to school officials, and the following morning, he was found dead beneath the dormitory window. The school also claimed the surveillance cameras had been broken, preventing anyone from seeing what truly happened. But there was one major problem. The story didn't add up. The family demanded to see the surveillance footage, but the school repeatedly refused, claiming the cameras were damaged. So, how could the authorities report that they had reviewed the footage to confirm their version of events? The contradictions in the official narrative were glaring. Moreover, several students came forward with a different version of events. According to them, Dong had been physically attacked by a group of students, some said as many as 7, before being pushed out of the window. Even more alarming, it was rumored that one of the students involved in the attack had a father with strong political connections. Was this a case of bullying gone wrong, with the school and local authorities covering up the truth to protect influential families? As the days passed, the family's suspicions deepened, and more students joined in their demand for justice. On January 4th, a small group of protesters gathered outside the school to protest Dong's death. But things took a turn for the worse when Dong's uncle was arrested by the police, further enraging the crowd. The situation soon escalated. Protesters, many of them students, clashed with police officers in the streets. They were demanding answers, demanding justice. The protesters were met with heavy-handed tactics by the police, who used batons and other forceful methods to disperse the crowds. Videos from the scene showed women and students being pushed and beaten, with several people injured in the clashes. This was no longer just about one student's death. It was about the systemic issues of corruption, abuse of power, and the lack of transparency that had been festering beneath the surface for years. By January 6th, the protest had reached its peak. The number of demonstrators had swelled to an estimated 50,000. The streets of Pucheng were filled with chants of "Justice for Dong," and protesters clashed with police in full force. Some even managed to break through the police barricades, entering the school grounds to confront the administration directly. Videos captured chaotic scenes of people overpowering police officers, and in one shocking moment, a police officer was even beaten and collapsed from the crowd's aggression. What made the Pucheng riots even more significant was the role of social media. Despite the Chinese government's attempts to suppress online discussions about the protests, videos and posts continued to spread on social platforms like Weibo and Douyin. The authorities deleted posts, erased videos, and tried to flood the internet with distractions like celebrity gossip and entertainment news in an attempt to divert public attention. But the protesters were determined. They used every available platform to spread the word, and soon the unrest was known far beyond Pucheng. Ordinary citizens from all over the country began to support the protests, with many sharing their own stories of abuse or corruption they had faced in their own communities. The hashtag #Justice for Dong spread like wildfire, even though it was censored and removed from many platforms. Despite the government's heavy censorship and propaganda efforts, the truth about what happened in Pucheng began to leak out. Videos of police brutality and protesters being detained continued to surface, giving the world a glimpse into the raw emotions and desperation that fueled the protest. It became clear that the issue at hand was not just about Dong's death. It was about a system that had long protected the powerful while silencing the voices of the ordinary citizens. As the protests continued to grow, tensions reached a boiling point. On January 6th, large groups of students from neighboring schools joined in, swelling the ranks of the protesters. The crowds surged forward, trying to force their way into the school to confront the officials. The police struggled to control the situation, and it was clear that they were losing their grip on the situation. One of the most remarkable aspects of the protests was how even young students, some of them underage, stood at the forefront of the clashes. They weren't just fighting for justice for Dong, they were fighting for a system that would treat them as equals, without the shadow of corruption or fear of retaliation. The standoff between police and protesters lasted through the evening, and by nightfall, the streets of Pucheng were filled with the sounds of clashes, shouting, and the distant wail of sirens. Despite the government's best efforts to control the narrative, videos continued to leak out, showing the chaos unfolding in real time. By the morning of January 7th, the protests had finally started to dissipate. Local authorities had released Dong's uncle, and the crowds had begun to disperse. The police maintained a heavy presence in the area, blocking roads and keeping a tight grip on the city to prevent more people from joining the protests. The government may have quelled the unrest for now, but the questions surrounding Dong's death remained unanswered. The protests were a powerful symbol of the growing discontent in China. People were tired of being silenced, tired of living in a system where the truth was always hidden behind a veil of secrecy and corruption. And for those who had taken part in the protests, the fight for justice was far from over. The Pucheng protests were not just about one man's death. They were a call to action, a demand for transparency, and a challenge to a system that has long been resistant to change. Despite the authorities' attempts to silence the voices of the people, the truth about Dong's death and the deep-rooted issues in Chinese society has continued to resonate. The people of Pucheng have shown that, even in the face of overwhelming opposition, their voices can be heard.